Welcome into the roundtable. I'm Brad Wakai. That is my co-host Tyson Gentry. We are back with another edition of the NFL Draft Dive as we keep plugging and chugging away as we get closer and closer to the NFL Draft. I'm excited, man. I'm starting to feel it, honestly. Like there's McShay's new mock draft came out. I'm seeing some like teams may be aggressive. Things are going to change. Like I'm starting to get excited for this thing.
Are we going to see a Bradley Ross mock draft posted for the people?
Oh man, God, I haven't done one since college. It's been a while.
That's how you know you had a good time in college. That Brad was making mock drafts in the frat house.
Yeah, they were all wrong. Like we were much better at the NBA drafts. I think for obvious reasons. But yeah, it was a college thing. Maybe I'll dust off the old mock draft fingers here next year.
I know you still got the notebook sitting somewhere or whatever. You got like your glasses that you wear when you put it together. Probably in like a dark room is what I'm picturing. Maybe a fireplace, handle of bourbon.
It's like one of those things. Yeah, it's like a secret lair. You know, you touch it, and all of a sudden it goes from like a fireplace, like a sick office or something, and it's just waiting for me to go back.
You got to blow the dust off the book.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's get into it. We got the LA Chargers picking 21st, and this is the first time they're picking in the first round in this draft. Early 54th pick. They also have the 85th pick. They also have in the top three. Brandon Staley kept his job after that collapse against the Jaguars. People thought potentially they would move on from him and go be aggressive and get a Sean Payton, but then they remembered that Dean Spanos is the owner of this franchise and is cheap. Justin Herbert, still the quarterback there, obviously a premier type of player. They need to start rattling off some playoff wins and not waste his rookie contract, which seems to be wasted sooner than later. Team needs. Now, I have linebacker, defensive backs, offensive line as some of the main three that I think they should target. They did go out and get Eric Kendricks on a 2-year deal worth about 13 and a quarter, but Eric Kendricks is on the back end of his career here. I still think, they could potentially use an upgrade there, and obviously defensive back with Nasir Adderley retiring, that should be a priority as well. So Tyson, if you're the Chargers, where are you first looking?
Well, I'm looking at my run defense from last year. I'm throwing up. That's probably where I start. I mean, 5.4 yards a carry in 2022. That's atrocious. Like you could have lined up and ran the ball against the Chargers every single play and probably put up 30 points. Like that's how bad this unit was. I saw in McShay's mock draft, and I'm a little bit upset that he stole my thunder here a day before we get to go. But I mentioned Kalijah Kancey is potentially a fit earlier in the draft for like the Lions and a couple other teams. Like this is the head coach who had Aaron Donald on his roster for a long time. This is an undersized defensive tackle from Pitt with insane athleticism and really, really good power. How much he helps their run defense is, a question of mine because at 280 pounds, it's harder to influence Jason Kelce and Landon Dickerson than it is to whoever you're playing at Pittsburgh on any given Saturday. I also think they need wideout, Brad. Like Mike Williams misses a ton of time. Keenan Allen misses a ton of time. Keenan Allen's, he's on hole 13. There's a couple good holes left, but he's going to be hanging out in the clubhouse here before too long, which sucks. I love Keenan Allen. But that makes sense to me, too. I think Quentin Johnston here makes a little bit of sense as a big body type to pair with Mike Williams, who's another one. I don't love the fit personally, but I'm seeing it thrown around a lot. I think Zay Flowers is a really, really good name to watch here. I think the way he plays and kind of his style, I think you can learn a lot from Keenan Allen. And then Jordan Addison, like a dude that wins with, well, we thought one with speed, and then we saw him run at the combine, and now we're not super sure. But don't be shocked if it's wide out here either.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I think if you want to go defensive line, that should be a target. Basically they just looked at what they had last year. The front office did, and it's like, we're okay with you losing Christian Covington, Tyler Davison at the defensive line spot, and then letting their linebackers go Troy Reeder and Drew Tranquill. They're gone. They're just like, this is bad. So re-signed Morgan Fox, and like I said, got Eric Kendricks, but I'd still think they need an upgrade at linebacker and defensive line to stop that horrendous rushing defense that they had going last year. But I agree with you, man. I was thinking the same thing. If I'm the Chargers, like we already have an elite QB, let's continue to have weapons around them. I don't think at this spot right here, you can really upgrade your offensive line in terms of a blue chip type of talent. So might as well get a wide receiver. And you said the two names I was thinking. I think Zay Flowers would be a 1-on-1 replacement for Keenan Allen if he's ends up being that good. Obviously, that's the question. Or if Quentin Johnson, you just want to go big, kind of pair somebody opposite of Mike Williams and have the big body guys out there. That could be an option as well. I'll throw Dalton Kincaid, the tight end, into the mix. I know they have Gerald Everett, and I know they just re-signed Donald Parham, but Dalton Kincaid's not necessarily somebody you just line up in a 3-point stance and then have him block and run routes. Like, he could be a weapon on the interior, running up the seam and utilizing him more in the passing game and kind of getting into a new age Travis Kelce type of role where you use him as a receiver to replace Keenan Allen. So I'll throw that name out there as somebody to keep an eye on as well.
That'd be really, really, really fun. I want it now. Now that's the pick that I wanted to make. Also, Austin Eckler seeking a trade. They gave him permission to seek the trade. Is this a Bijan spot? Shouldn't be, like, with the holes that you have on the roster, but you want to plug somebody in for the most productive running back in the NFL, you could do a lot worse than Bijan.
And we just got a shout out. Storm Norton is no longer a Charger. He went to the New Orleans Saints. So Tyson is devastated. That's his guy. So no longer in LA. Storm Norton.
He is the absolute epitome of offensive line play in the NFL.
All right, let's get on to the Baltimore Ravens here. Eric DeCosta coming over under heat a little bit from the wide receiver he drafted. Your boy, Rashad Bateman, out of Minnesota. Is it a little deserved potentially? I mean, there's some.
He said the quiet part out loud.
He did, and at some point that's going to happen, right? When you've continually kind of, let's just put it lightly, and missed on a few things in the draft. Now, Ozzie Newsome, if he was still there, I don't necessarily know that that's coming out of his mouth. One, Ozzie Newsome could probably just kick his ass, and then two,
slap right back in.
Yeah, and then two, I don't know if you really want to be going at Ozzie Newsome in that sense. So let's look at what they got going on right now. Obviously, the big question mark with the Ravens is Lamar Jackson going to be there or not? So they slapped the franchise non-exclusive on him. So if somebody wants to make an offer, either the Ravens can match or they'll get 2 first-round picks back. John Harbaugh is still the head coach there. They do not have a lot of capital, 22nd and 86 in the first 3 rounds of this year's draft. So that may be kind of driving that. Let's hope somebody offers Lamar so we can kind of recoup some draft picks here. Obvious team needs wide receiver. I also put down some offensive line help, cornerback, and I think edge rusher, to be completely honest with you, Tyson. Baltimore Ravens, where are you looking here 22nd in the draft?
Well, the reason I laugh there is they've had the same team needs for what feels like a decade. Like, it's just the same thing over and over again. And, like, if you're going to go wide receiver, I think Quentin Johnson makes sense in Todd Monken's offense. Like, we haven't seen it at the NFL level, but just translating it from what it was at Georgia to the way that it looks in the bigs, they have to throw the ball to the wide receiver. It doesn't matter if Lamar Jackson's your quarterback or not. Like, this is a new playbook, so I'm a little bit more optimistic that they're going to do that. But the Ravens averaged 12.2 yards per catch on throws to wideouts last season, 23rd in the NFL. Playing with a premier quarterback, I know he's not the best thrower of the football, but if you can't get open while Lamar Jackson is doing Lamar Jackson things, then you weren't getting open anyways. And some of that was, it's Devin Duvernay. And it's Bateman for a week, and then he's driving that number up a ridiculous amount because of the run after catch stuff that he's able to do. I don't love QJ here, man, to be honest with you. Like, it feels like you're just drafting a little bit faster version of Isaiah Likely, who you nabbed super late in the draft a year ago at tight end. And I know that might not be totally fair to QJ, but this is a team that is at a crossroads because everyone wants them to go up. Like, if you're replacing Lamar, you got to go up. You got to trade up to 3 with the Cardinals, or you got to get up to 6 before the Raiders get somebody. They can't. Like, financially, they might be able to, and they maybe can swing it with some of the guys they have on their roster, but then you're hoping that somebody at the top of the draft, A, wants those guys, and then B, doesn't have a better offer on the table. I think Baltimore should be looking to go backwards, if anything. But if they don't get this thing resolved with Lamar, it's impossible to tell where they're going to go.
Yeah, 100%. Like, that's the first and foremost that we got to figure out is what they do with Lamar Jackson. Because if he's gone, then why do you draft why do you draft a wide receiver in the first round? It makes no sense. Like, there's no point in doing that. Maybe there's somebody else that you like further down the board that you can see playing in your organization and helping out in the short term a lot longer, or in the long term a lot longer than somebody in the short term would if you go wide receiver. And let me just point this out real quick too. Demarcus Robinson, Sammy Watkins, two of their receivers gone. It's not like they were impact players at all, but two
They
more out
played.
of that room gone, like out. Jawan James, offensive tackle, Ben Powers, offensive guard, they're gone. Justin Houston, Steven Means, JPP, Calais Campbell, all on the defensive line. They're out. And then you have your secondary players, Kyle Fuller, Marcus Peters, the heart and soul of that defense. Chuck Clark, safety, traded to the Jets. Like, they got a lot of holes in this roster. And we're looking at it like they just need Lamar and let's just run it back. They need significant help here. And especially when you look at who they signed. I mean, Justice Hill re-signed and Nelson Aguilar, wide receiver. They're looking to build through the draft. The problem is, Tyson, they don't have a ton of capital, especially at the high pick. So I think when you say they should trade back, I completely agree with you. You have to start getting more capital if you're letting a ton of people walk out of your building and then not signing anybody through free agency. But let me just say this. If they do draft in this position, I know you're not big on it. I think you have to go Quentin Johnson here. I think you do. A big body receiver, and yes, you have that in Likely. I don't think you can underestimate how important that would be for Lamar Jackson, though. You've drafted him small receivers his entire career. Like, you're like, oh, man, I wonder why he's not progressing as a passer. It's like, well, these guys are tiny. They look like the defensive backs out there. Go get some big body guys and let him develop into some accuracy if it ever does come. So I think Quentin Johnson has to be your guy here. There's other people saying Jordan Addison. You're basically drafting Hollywood Brown again, boomer bust guy. So I don't think you can do that. If they do stay here, my thing is Quentin Johnson, unless there's a Joey Porter Jr., who I've seen Daniel Jeremiah mock to here, which I don't think he falls this far.
No, if he does, that would be, I think, another smash. But again, that would be such a Ravens move to ignore the offensive holes for another year, strengthen that defense a little bit. Because at a certain point, like, it becomes Harbaugh's fault and it becomes DeCosta's fault and all this stuff. And it's right now, it's everybody in the world seemingly anti-Lamar Jackson without, in my opinion, taking like a fair look at this thing. People want to say like they've given him a bunch of help. They traded Hollywood just to take or they didn't even let the pair operate as a pair for an entire season because we had an injury to Bateman, and then they trade Hollywood. And then it's like, okay, go out there with one-legged J.K. Dobbins, a one-legged Rashad Bateman, and Mark Andrews and see what happens. Like, that's not fair, man.
Okay, let's get into Minnesota here at 23. And there's been some recent interesting developments under the Minnesota Vikings pick here from the mock drafters out there. And I'll just say it, man. I mean, they have Kirk Cousins as their quarterback. Now, Kevin O'Connell is going to be in his second season. I thought they did a good job last year. 13-4. Record was inflated compared to how good of a team they actually were, winning so many close games. But at the end of the day, somebody does have to win those. Besides this 23rd pick in the first three rounds, they only have the 87th in the third. Not a ton of capital here if you're the Vikings. And it seems like they're getting a bit older as well. But I don't want to bury the lead. Prominent mock drafters have them taking Hendon Hooker, the quarterback from Tennessee, at this pick. So let's start there and kind of work our way around from there. What do you think about that?
I would like it personally. The question mark to me, like, Hendon Hooker is coming off an injury, so it would make sense to give him kind of a redshirt year, quote unquote, in the NFL. He's going to be 26 then by the time he would take the field, if that's the way that you want to do this. And then at the end of his first contract, he's 30. And I don't know if that's the way you want to play this, because to me, he was one of the better throwers of the football, if not like top 3 thrower of the football in the college class last season. It's a way different ball game, man. Is he pro ready to step in right away? Because you're going to piss Kirk Cousins off. And we've seen how he handles being disrespected before in the past. Look at what he did with Washington, kind of strung them along and played their hand into getting another fully guaranteed contract, which, by the way, dude, like, Kirk Cousins was getting fully guaranteed contracts way before anybody else, and nobody gave a shit, which a little pat on the back for Kirky Coupons. Like, he deserves a little love for that. They need to go quarterback. Like, at some point within the next couple of years, you need to get the successor in there, or hopefully an upgrade, to be completely honest with you. Kirk was not as good as people thought. Like he wasn't as the difference between his actual play and his stats wasn't Geno Smith level, in my opinion, but it wasn't like that far off. People were, can you believe what Kirk Cousins has done this year? And he was just Kirk Cousins. He looked the exact same to me. If they don't go quarterback, I think you have to look at a wide receiver here. And it might sound counterintuitive because they have Justin Jefferson, but then they have KJ Osborne. And like that's you're gonna run into the season with that as your number two after you get rid of Adam Thielen. You can't do that. Dalvin Cook is probably on the outs. A lot of questions to answer in Minnesota.
Yeah, and when you look at the players they let walk too, it's kind of crazy. On NFL.com, they have where these players have gone to, and like all the players they let walk immediately ended up on a team. Like Irv Smith, Bengals, Dalvin Tomlinson, defensive line, went to the Browns. Eric Kendricks, we talked about, Chargers. And they lost four corners. Dancer went to the Commanders, Patrick Peterson back end, but he went to the Steelers, Duke Shelley to the Raiders, and the only person that hasn't been signed they let out of the door, Chandon Sullivan, which I think is interesting. So there's like clearly roster making players as of now. They just let out of the door. Now they did sign a ton of players. Byron Murphy, I think, is a big one at corner. Marcus Davenport, edge rusher. So they're signing guys. I think they're using free agency and getting like these stopgap players with their lack of draft capital, to try to continue to build this roster, at least make it competitive for next season, which I think is interesting. Just to address the Hendon Hooker thing here. Does that not feel like a reach a little bit though? Like he was kind of on the borderline, like maybe first round, maybe not. Then all of a sudden now he's going to go 23rd to the Vikings. Like maybe you sit him, but like you said, it's not like he's necessarily a project, Tyson.
Right.
Like he's kind of the finished deal. And then you sit him behind Kirk Cousins. And like you said, by the time he's on his rookie contract, he's 30. Like, do you want to give him another one? It's interesting to say the least. My thing is, I don't know why Emmanuel Forbes isn't the look here for the Vikings. The cornerback from Mississippi State, like he graded out extremely well from PFF last year. He was the 16th out of 917 corners in college based on their grading and rankings. I know he's a little small, like 6'1", 166, which is tiny, but I think the Vikings need cornerback help, and someone like that sitting there. That seems surprising that this isn't the look that the Vikings would go.
You know what's surprising is the fact that they gave up premium capital for a guy who doesn't really move the needle in the deepest tight end class in recent memory. That's not brought up like at all. I can't believe it. I mean, like, would you rather have that pick or those picks and that flexibility to then get a Darnell Washington later in the draft, to get a Dalton Kincaid here in the first round? Or would you rather have traded that stuff for a guy who helped you get bounced by the New York Giants in round one? And before you say that's unfair because they didn't know they're going to lose to the Giants, yes, the fuck they did. Like, they might not have believed it, but somebody in that building had to look around and be like, okay, we can't beat Philly. We can't beat San Francisco. We can't beat Dallas. TJ Hawkinson didn't make you better than any of those teams. And now you're paying the price.
Yeah, 100%. And you kind of just, it feels like they went for it when they didn't have a team that could really win the whole thing. And now you're like, oh shit, well, this is what we're left with. So we'll see. I think they're an interesting spot. If they do take Hooker, I'd be surprised, if I'm being completely honest, that although the prominent mock drafters have him there, it feels like it's kind of zeroing in on that. Although we haven't really heard it from anybody close to the Vikings per se that, hey, they really like Hendon Hooker. So we'll see. Maybe that's just a thing to kind of fill some space now as we're about a month away, 3 weeks away from the NFL draft itself. Let's finish with the Jacksonville Jaguars, Tyson. Very good year for Doug Peterson and the Jags. Trevor Lawrence seems to have hit his stride in year 2, and they won a playoff game. Won the division. I mean, about as good as you could have asked to the start of the Doug Peterson era, who will be coaching in his second year upcoming. 25th pick, 57th, 89th. So they have capital they can draft with. It's going to be weird, or 24th. I think it's going to be weird for them to kind of look and be like, wait a minute, we're not drafting the top 5?
Yeah, we have to wait. You guys normally wait 4 hours for this? Are you kidding me? We're done in 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's extremely interesting. So, I mean, as I look at it, I always think a team like this, you can't ever go wrong with trying to build the offensive line. I still think I'm not sold on their draft pick last year, Walker. So I still think maybe if you can find somebody later in the draft to get an edge rusher here, might as well take a shot on that. You might as well be able to get after the passer. And I also think cornerback's a major thing that they're looking for as well. Tyson, what have you circled that do you think the Jags should address?
Well, I think Emmanuel Forbes, who you mentioned, makes a ton of sense. I also think Deontay Banks, the corner from Maryland, makes a ton of sense. But I know the boy, man. I know Doug Peterson. You know Doug Peterson. I think this might be the first real Dalton Kincaid spot that we've seen. I know they have Evan Ingram and they franchise tagged him. That's awesome. Who does Trevor Lawrence love to throw the football to? Big bodies, tight ends, guys over the middle. This is an offense that doesn't necessarily need him, right? Because you're bringing Calvin Ridley into what was a top 10 unit already a year ago. But I think that would just be really fun. Michael Mayer's a better blocker, so maybe that's a lean too for them as far as if they want to go tight end. But corner is the biggest need. And I don't know if Forbes is too little. I don't know if Banks is ready. The dude had one pick last year, but that doesn't bother me. Like, when you're breaking up passes in college and you don't end up with the interception all the time, that's okay. That's corner play. And he broke up, I think, 10 passes a year ago on top of the one interception. So he can play a little bit. It just – they're, for the first time in a long time, like, they shouldn't be taking projects. They should be taking finished products.
100%. Like, they should be getting, hey, we're drafting late in the first round. We need somebody who can step in and play now. Like, immediately impact. That's why you draft players in the NFL draft in the first round. Like, you can plug and play, immediately have an impact. If Deontay Banks is here and falls to 24, I've seen him go as high as 15 in some places. Now, of course, we're scouring the internet, like, what's going on in these mock drafts? You know,
right. Yeah, everybody has somebody different. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know how true, or I guess how accurate that is. I'm going to trust McShay. I'm going to trust the Daniel Jeremiahs, who maybe they don't have the information right now. They're a little bit more plugged in with some of their old contacts than some random guy on the internet. But, you know, I think that's a good I think that's a good pick for him. If it is Deontay Banks, like you just laid out, you know, they need cornerback. You know, they re-signed Trey Herndon, lost Shaq Griffin. Really nobody that jumps out to you there for Jacksonville. But would it shock you here if they went like defensive line? You know what I mean? Like,
it's got to be like Will McDonald though, right? Like, that's kind of in the range that you're in, or Adeboro or whatever his name is from Northwestern. Apologize again for getting that wrong, but like, or Uzama. I mean, these are guys that this is their range and this is where they could go. I don't know, man. It didn't seem like Doug Peterson was overly thrilled with taking defensive linemen in the first round every year he was in Philadelphia. I don't know if he wants to start this off doing the same thing.
Yeah, and they're set at wide receiver, obviously being aggressive for, you know, basically setting the market for Christian Kirk and the others that they got into Jacksonville. So they're pretty good at skill position and re-signing Ingram. Like, do they want to be aggressive and go out and get another tight end to add to the mix, since that's a Trevor Lawrence thing? We think that they should address the defense here, find somebody who they can plug and play immediately if they want to continue to go back to the playoffs. Because let's be honest, Tyson, they're in the driver's seat in this division for the foreseeable future.
First time in a long time, baby.
Jeez, man. Talk about, you know, not for long, man. The NFL moves quick. Like, they were selecting first overall twice in a row the previous 2 years. Now they're in the driver's seat in this fucking division. It's crazy.
Yeah, and then on top of that, the next draft dive we do, we'll have the Bengals later than that. We'll have a couple teams that like are looking around. You know, like we said, they're confused on how they're even like this draft takes this long. And to be honest with you, like, Jacksonville is kind of slowly turning into a spot that I think people are going to want to play. We finally found out that Trevor Lawrence can play,
right?
And that's going to be a huge driver. We see a lot of people trying to go play in Florida, and Trevor Lawrence versus Tua.
Although Miami's a little nicer than Jacksonville.
Just a bit. But Tom Brady got everybody moved to Tampa.
Yeah, good point. Good point. And Tyson alluded to it. You know, that's going to do it for this edition of the NFL Draft Dive, but we will be visiting some other teams, 25 through 28. A lot to discuss there. We're excited for that one. Giants, Cowboys, Bills, Bengals are going to be making the cut on that one. That'll be coming to you next week. If you missed our Masters preview, hopefully you're sweating the bets with us. You know, if you're live betting, we gave you a ton of information there. we got a ton of content coming out for you next week as we get ready for NBA playoffs and different things of that sort. So make sure you are subscribed to us if you're watching us on YouTube, or if you're listening to us on podcast, just hit your feed immediately. Instagram to follow us in the meantime is @_the roundtable pod _. Our TikTok handle is the exact same as our Instagram, or you can always send us a tweet over @TRT_pod. We appreciate you guys listening as always. We will be back next week. Enjoy your weekends, and we will talk to you guys soon. Peace.